Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to The Insiders exclusively here on adfreeshows.com. And we're joined with someone very special today, an insider for sure, Mr. John Carlan. John, how are you, sir?
I'm well, my friend. Nice. Thank you so much, Conrad, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Man, I'm excited to be with you, and I can't wait to pick your brain. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody listening what your role was with WWE?
I had many. I was there for, I was in my 23rd year before I was part of the unfortunate cutbacks for COVID-19. We lost about 70 folks just for COVID. You know, like I always tell people, it had nothing to do with my background or my work ethic or, any antics in the office or any of those, types of things. But I started there in 1998,
Wow.
believe it or not. And I had worked at ESPN prior. That was the beginning of my career. I had another 2 years in the city at a post-production facility, but I got WWE in February of '98. And funny part about it was my wife and I were living in an apartment like across the street from the TV building. So I would walk there every day. It was just, and then even come home for lunch from time to time because it was just a layup. So it was cool. And that was my beginning. So I started off as a PA, and that's for production assistant for those people who don't know. I was a PA at ESPN, so I came in as a PA2 actually. And I worked on a lot of the shows at the beginning. I have a fun little stat that I always tell people is I was one of the only I was the one to work the first ever Sunday Night Heat, the
Wow.
first ever SmackDown, and the first ever Bottom Line, which was later when I was actually the producer. So those three shows I worked on the first ever shows of any of all of those three. I don't think Bottom Line even exists anymore. Maybe it does overseas or whatever. But so moved along. Did my work. Became went through the chain of command, the associate producer, the senior associate producer. Then like I said, I was produced. I worked in the home video department after that. I did quite a few documentaries. Another really cool fact that I like to tell folks is I was the very first producer to actually get a recorded interview with the Undertaker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love that one because Taker was Taker back then until he became the American Badass. So when he became the American Badass, now he was a human being. So I sat down with him and I produced the "This Is My Yard" home video with Taker
Wow.
and it was awesome. I mean, it was just great. And look, I've been around the locker room for a long time. I've worked on the road for a number of years, and still, when you see the Undertaker, you get intimidated. That's all there is to it, But he was great. I mean, he was busting my chops a bit, but he was great. One time I had to go back and get him, and he was in catering, and I was like, "Hey, look, Taker, I need, we need to keep moving along on this interview. I just want to get it done so I can get out of your way." And he said, "Hey, John, you know what? Can you see? For God's sakes, I'm sitting here. I'm trying to have a bite to eat. And if you come bother me again, I'm going to take you out back of the building and whoop your ass." No, I'm just kidding. I'll be right there. So he came in and he was great. And the guys in the back, were like, we went through half of it. I think we sat down for a couple of hours. We went through half of it, and then we ended up. He ended up having to go out, for rehearsals and stuff. And I was like, I hope I can say that. But and the guys in the back were like, "Dude, I hope you got enough because there ain't no chance he's coming back." And what do you know? Half hour later, and here he came. It was great. So we banged out the whole thing, and I went back and produced the video, and I'd like to think it was a success. I know I don't remember the numbers or anything, but it was a cool moment. And then I just moved on. Like I said, I became the producer of Bottom Line, and then Jacked was another. They were both syndicated shows, right? So those are the shows that go out to, they get customized to go out to all different parts of the country. So in other words, like when the XFL was first a thing, Coach was my man announcer, Jonathan Coachman, and we used to have to customize for all those different XFL markets for the Renegades or for whatever it was. That's just an example. Other ones, they would do live event promos that would just cover that area of the country or whatever. So that's what those syndicated shows were about. And they were just basically recap shows. So what I would have to do is not true. I'm sorry. Half recap, half like basically enhancement matches, right? And
Right.
that means there was like an up and coming talent against a guy you knew he was going to beat, right? A local, right? So we used to get like 3 of those matches, and then the rest of the show was like either, depending on which one, I forget which was which, but one of them was like Raw, three enhancement matches, and then 3 segments recapping the biggest moments in Raw. And I would do those with, like, I think Coach was definitely my main announcer, but I had other, like Al Snow was a color commentator for a while. Trying to think who else. Yeah, because one of them was that, and then the other one, I think once we got to bottom line, it was, because I think Jack was first. I'm not sure about that, but then it was a stand-up show, right? It wasn't a play-by-play. We weren't doing any of the matches anymore. It was simply Coach on camera, pitch to the next match, pitch the Raw recap, Coach on camera, pitch to that recap, whatever, that kind of thing. Coach react, that kind of thing. And then moving forward, like I said, it was on the road for a number of years. So I was the floor manager. So the floor manager is the guy, and I know you had Tommy Carlucci on, so yes. Tommy was also a floor manager. So what that means, and he did the Spanish announce table, the famous Spanish announce table, and I did like the Raw or the SmackDown guys. I did JR and the King for a while. I did Cole and Tazz for a while. So that's just the guy, that goofy guy that you see sitting ringside, you fans out there with the headphones on, and who runs away when any wrestler gets near. That was me. The most scariest experience was in the UK. We had a show in the UK, and I had, so that was like 2001 maybe, 2002 maybe, somewhere in that area. And it was, Kevin Nash had just come back to the company. And he got this rivalry going with his best friend, Triple H, right? And the two of them, oh my God, they came gunning for me at the announce table, both of them, 2 giant men, and I almost died. Thankfully, I ran like hell. So that was a cool little interesting moment, scary, but fun. And then, in 2004, we started WWE Classics on Demand, and I was lucky enough to be part of that team. So at this point, I was, I wasn't the boss, but I was second in command of the department, basically. So if you all remember Classics, so it used to be WWE 24/7 at the beginning, and that changed to Classics on Demand. And we had a lot of fun doing that, because that was when the libraries came into play, right? That's when the libraries came into play. So, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, Conrad, now, or you want to save the library discussion for.
I mean, I'm enjoying listening.
All right. So the libraries, basically, 3/4 of the WWE tape library that exists today, I was, again, lucky enough to be put in the position to acquire those libraries. That was my job. My job from the production team, just because for Classics on Demand, that was our gimmick, right? That was our thing. We had to produce old programs, right? I'm sorry, repackage the old programs to make them feel new again, right? How do we attract the audience to these shows from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? And we came up with creative ways. We really did. We made some original shows. We did a show called WWE Hall of Fame, which was hosted by Mean Gene. So we would preview a Hall of Famer every month. So the schedule worked monthly, right? So Classics on Demand, here's the theme for October. Okay, it's Halloween themed. So you'd have your Halloween Havoc from 92 and Halloween Havoc from 96. And, we did some other, we did some spooky stuff with Taker moments, or whatever, stuff like that. And then we had a bin that was called the Territories. So we just used the territories that we acquired, right? So, the Mid-South and Mid-Atlantic and, all the old school championship wrestling from Florida, Bret Hart, the Calgary with the Hearts. So that was one, and then there was the Hall of Fame category. Like I said, there was the actual show that Gene hosted, and then like some of the best matches from said Hall of Famer in that category. So we had like a half a dozen different categories for folks to enjoy, and we all contributed very much to it and enjoyed it. And it was pretty innovative at that time, because this was like pre your Netflix, pre that everything's on, that type of platform. So the on demand was big at this time. So we got in the on demand game, and I think we did a damn good job, and we got overlooked a lot in the company. We weren't as important as, obviously the Raws and the SmackDowns, and I understood that, but a lot of times we just got completely, overlooked. And the thing about it was we didn't like it too much, but every year, there was one department that always turned up, and this is true, one department that I believe almost every month we were in existence, or at least most of them, we turned a profit. And that was something for us to be proud of. So that was fine. We got like 85,000 subscriptions out of nowhere, like right out of the gate, which was awesome.
I was one of those.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. We worked hard at it, so I hope you enjoyed it. But anyway, back to the libraries. Yeah, so I was able to go on the road. So one person from the production team, which is me, and then one person from our library staff would go. The library guys are the guys who take care of all the tapes, or back in the day, tapes. We don't have any tape. The tapes don't do anything anymore. They're all in an ingest system, and they're all digitized, and the tapes are irrelevant today. But that was the thing we purchased. So we went everywhere. Like I went and got Mid-South. I went and got Championship Wrestling in Florida. I went and got Stampede, which is the Heart territory up in Calgary. I went and got WCCW in Texas, right? The Monarchs. David, yikes. Kevin is still a good friend. Kevin. So Kevin ended up. It's another cool thing we did on Classics on Demand was we did some old territory. I told you there was a territories bin, but we also did specific shows. So I did two different shows that I produced. One was called The History of ECW, which again, to me, my thing was I always wanted to make sure there was some authentic stuff with the hosts, right? I didn't think it was fair or smart or the right thing to do to have Michael Cole come in and host The History of ECW, right?
Agree.
Like, let's be fair. But Cole did look. My boss actually at the time, he actually another show that we did was called The History of Raw versus Nitro, right? We had a Raw versus Nitro gimmick, and Cole hosted that, and that made sense, right? Because that's his thing. So in the history of ECW and the history of WCCW, those are the two that I did. I had history of ECW to me at that time, no brainer, Tazz.
Mm-hmm.
And Tazz was a good friend. Still is. I did a piece on him, which got us really. Actually, at the beginning, we did again back to my home video days. I produced a video called "The History of Hardcore." I think it was something like that. And that was when Tazz had first come in. So we became very friendly there because he was my host, and we had a lot of fun. So there was a building next door to the television building that was dilapidated and falling apart and abandoned. So that's where we put Tazz to host The History of Hardcore. We put him like hanging out a window. We put him in with a smashed glass. We had a smoke machine going where he would just walk through this empty warehouse, stepping on broken chairs and the whole bit, and the broken foundation and all of that. Sitting in a broken elevator, doing a stand up, whatever. So that was fun. So that we got to be tight, and then we kind of rolled from there. And like I said, I worked with him on the road a bunch, and then we did Sunday Night Heat from the restaurant. We used to have a WWF restaurant used to be in Times Square, if people remember that. So we would shoot Heat there every Sunday, and Tazz and Cole, the host of that also. So that's how Tazz and I became very, very friendly. I did it, like I said, I did a piece on him before they were superstars. That really kind of cemented our friendship. I went to his home. I met his wife and his son, obviously, who's now Hook.
Yeah.
And back then he was just a baby. I mean, he's the same age as I think he's the same age as my oldest. My oldest son is 25. I think they were born. Taz and I, again, I think our kids were born right around the same time. And unfortunately, our dads passed away like one day after each other.
Oh man.
And even then, he put the Taz mission on me, and I had to tap. I had to tap him. He was like 10 years old, but so that, that kind of was how that went. And then, so, and then it evolved, like Tazz moved on. So I had Joey Styles as the host, right? Makes sense. Joey was working the company for quite a few years. And then I had Tommy Dreamer with Joey for a while. So that was cool. That fit. Tommy is great. I've worked with Tommy a bunch of times. He's always been good. I did another hardcore. I think we did a top 10 hardcore moments or something on classics in one of the bins that one month. And Tommy came in and did the whole, he was Professor Dreamer. So he came in and we had a chalkboard, and of course it wasn't a pointer like the teacher used. It was a kendo stick, and he would point out all the different items that he would write on the chalkboard. And it was fun. He's always been a cool guy to me. I loved working with him. And after that, so that was a good 10 years that we did that. So that was a good run. And then, birthed the network, right? So the network started in 2014. And so my other boss, my old boss had left at that point, and the new boss had moved in. I mean, I had worked for him in the past on SmackDown before this. So he kind of took over the network thing, and I was basically second in command, and I ended up being like director of VOD content, basically, for lack of a better term. My title wasn't quite that, but it was a kind of a goofy, too many words in it title, so I just cut them out. So anything that went video on demand went through me. So, and that was a big get. At the beginning, the running theme in the building amongst the higher ups was, we need to have 10,000 hours on the network, within the first 5 years, or something like that. 10,000 VOD hours. So basically what we were doing was, again, recreating stuff that we didn't do in classics. But this was also every single Raw, every single SmackDown, every single Monday Nitro, every single history of ECW, amongst other things. Those were the big ones, right? And then we had other shows where we would do, all the Mid-South. We ended up putting up the whole Mid-South library. We ended up putting up the whole WCCW library. So again, we would try and keep a theme going for some of it, just like we did with classics. And then I would lay out 3 months at a time. I also did all the schedule. Well, that's not fair. So there was a young lady there named Amanda who was basically my assistant. She didn't really work for us. She kind of worked for the main part of the network, but she was my right-hand man, and I loved her for it. She made those schedules happen on my behalf, which was awesome. So basically, I would just lay out the 3 months. I would send it to her. She'd put it together, and then I send it out to the team. Send it out to the team. We're working with about a 12-man/woman team, and we nailed it. We got the 10,000 hours done, not in 5 years, in 3.
Wow,
which is a haul. Like at some point, at some months, Conrad, at the beginning, we were banging out 250 hours a month.
Wow.
In our team, and that's a lot, man. That was huge. And I credit all those guys and gals on the team, and they all know who they are. We had a great group. We had a great camaraderie. We had a lot of fun.
Take me through that process when you're getting an hour ready. I mean, you obviously have the old tapes. You're going through and changing the music and cutting out graphics, or what
Right.
all does that entail?
Yep. So that, again, was a big part of my job. So I'm glad you brought that up. Copyrighted music was the bane of my existence at WWE. So I had become basically I became the expert on it, because that was just my stick, and it just happened. So I became a liaison between production and legal. So anytime there was questions, and all of a sudden, this didn't just become a VOD, a network thing. This was like a company-wide thing. So anytime anybody had problems in the company, no matter what department they worked on, they came to me. And I hopefully got the answers every time, I think. But yeah, so I had spreadsheets like you wouldn't believe, with all the like whose theme it is, what's the theme, what's the song, what's the replacement, where do I find it? So we have, just so folks know, we have music libraries that we license, right? So that's just music that you hear on any television show or any, I don't know,
like Goldberg's theme. You could hear that at a baseball game or ESPN or whatever. It's
100%. Yeah. So, so we would have, most of the time it was these theme libraries. So like I said, I would have everybody set up. Copyrighted music was the hardest because the libraries were different, right? So ECW, for instance, was a layup because their production was so, how shall I put this?
Primitive.
Questionable. Amateurish. No offense, Paul. But the ECW, all of their entire library, with the exception of maybe one or two, because I know we had to have Joey recall a couple. Thank God Joey was there. They had all their tapes came with clean Joey on channel 1. And what I mean by that is just Joey, no crowd, no music. So that's the ultimate situation.
Perfect.
If every library was like that, my job would have been a breeze. So that was it. So then you would just take Joey, clean Joey on channel 1. We would get, that's the other thing. All the libraries were different depending on where they were from, right? So we would have crowd, we would get beds of crowd, either from those, like I said, those licensed libraries, or at times in the actual, like for example, in the ECW arena, when nothing was going on, when there was no music and it was just ECW, or whatever, we would steal that, and we would have massive timelines, and timelines is what we use on our Avid editing systems at WWE. So you would put them all on a timeline and label it ECW crowd, and then you would label WCCW crowd, or like the other ones that were way different, and you could find some of this on those not copyright, the libraries that we use for the fill-in music and stuff, because you can find crowd on there too in different capacities. So the ones we used to use off of there that were very helpful were for the old, like the Jim Crockett stuff, right? The in studio, right? The old in studio stuff. So that crowd is very different, right, than a crowd that's at a Monday Night Raw, right? So we would have to. So it was case by case, and it was hard, because everybody was different, And like I said, the ones that we didn't have clean or couldn't, we would have a couple of options. Number one would be we would do what we call try and phase out the music. So you would kind of take the music and like almost play it against itself and have it cancel each other out. Kind of, it's hard to describe, but you use one channel and then you use the other channel and try to get the announce as clean as possible while losing the music, and then just bury whatever music's left with your new cut. Other times, if that didn't work, you would have to just really eat it and not make the best edit you've ever made in your life, because okay, two things. You could go two ways. One, eliminate the announce altogether. And sometimes that worked and it fit and it was fine and you didn't miss anything. But there were other times where you had to have that announced or it didn't make any sense. So we would do the crowd and bury the bad piece of music, but tune up the announce every now and then, just barely, so you could hear him just barely, so you could get the point across, he or she, and just try your best not to get too much of the real music playing to the audience. That you did your best. And usually if anybody had a question about that and they saw the effort that we put in to not make it the main part of, either an entrance or a theme or an open or whatever package, nobody usually said anything. So that was good. But some of them were easier, like I said, some were easier than others. Like Mid-South comes to mind. Mid-South was like same kind of thing. They had a different crowd, right? So we had to find mid-South type crowd. It's different than championship wrestling. It's different than Mid-Atlantic. It's different than, Raw or Nitro or whatever. So you'd have to find that, figure that out. And again, I had all this stuff on spreadsheets, all of it, in our computer system and the whole thing. And so the Mid-South, the packages in Mid-South were a layup because they never put any. So the tricky thing is with the packages, if there's audio underneath or sound bites or stuff that you save, that's really hard. Or if the packages were from us, old Raws or old SmackDowns, we had those. Most of those were all like recorded in a certain spot, and you could go back and get the unedited package, get the sound bites by themselves, clean, put them back into the new music. But that wasn't all the time.
Why would you have to do that on your own stuff? I get if you're using UWF and they're playing.
I know. I will tell you. So back in the day, the rules, even for us, the rules weren't as strict as they are in the modern day.
I got you.
So every now and then we would have a song that was, I'm trying to think of one that would be, it could have been like a song that was
Marilyn Manson's Raw theme, maybe.
Yeah, something like that, right? Good at the time, not good now. So you'd have to go back and strip all of it. One I can remember is, do you remember the old TNT shows?
Mm-hmm.
Right, with Vince and Lord Alfred, right?
Yep.
So that was for those of you who don't know, that was an interview show with Vince and a gentleman by the name of Lord Alfred Hayes, as his kind of like Vince was Johnny Carson and Lord was Ed McMahon. So there was that, and then they would have guests and do skits and the whole thing. So there were 99 of those total shows, Conrad, and I produced. Our team produced all of them and put them up on the network. But a week or two later, we get a call from one of the music guys who I dealt with a lot, who was tied in with our legal team. Hey man, bad news. We just found out the TNT theme is copyrighted. It's no good. Holy crap. Now this stuff's been up on the network for 2 weeks with bad music. So I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but it was basically just me. I pulled all 99 shows down. I got our music composer at that time, Jim Johnston, who was worked the company for years. He did all the music up until the last 10 years or so. And Jim cut me a new theme, like boom. And I went in and I added it back into all 99 shows on the front end, on the back end, and anytime when they played it on the bumpers, right?
Wow.
It was hard. It took up the next 2 weeks of my time. I could do nothing else.
How long would it take you to do a single episode? Once you have you got the old theme, you're putting in the new theme. You said the open, the close, the bumpers. How much time would you have invested in recutting them? One episode?
I think it's case by case, depending on the difficulty of the program.
Sure.
But I think you could look. I think you could probably. And again, those TNTs could be problematic because there was a lot of bad music in there. So we would have to just pull out segments, not show them at all, or just, skip halfway through, or whatever. But I would say, so an average show, probably an hour,
Okay.
But most of the time. So here was the setup with that. So our team were all producers. Well, I mean, production assistants, associate producers. So we would produce the shows, and a lot of times, so at WWE, which is excellent for somebody who wants to be in TV, and again at ESPN way back when, I don't know how it is now. It wasn't like that. It was a union shop. So what I mean by that is, me personally as a PA back then, I couldn't touch any of the editing equipment. You had to use an editor at all times. At WWE, we became what we call predators. So we're producers and editors because we're editing all our stuff and we're producing all our own stuff.
Predators. All of that.
However, some of those tricky edits I talked about are some of the more difficult ones. Or if you just wanted it to be nice, with some extra graphics or some extra things, then you would definitely go to one of the guys or gals who is actually an editor, because that's their job and they're better at it than I am. That's the honest truth. I can edit my own show and put it up and send it to the network, no problem. But if there's some bumps in the road that I can't handle, I take it into my take it into my guys, and the same with audio. If you're struggling that much, you take it to an audio engineer, and the audio engineer will get it to be as best it can possibly be. Those two things. We could do both of those things as producers, but we have experts, right, that can do it better than we can and make it look better and sound better across the board.
One of the things that I loved as an ECW fan was just the overall vibe and feel of the show. And without the original music, it's just not the same. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, but I think the natural question a lot of people would have is, do you think WWE ever even considered trying to figure out how to license all those songs? Or did they just know going in, it's way too cost prohibitive. It's not even worth the conversation.
Well, no, for ECW, the original theme, we got cleared. We got the original ECW theme is cleared. Like Sabu's music is good. Tazz's music was good. Dreamer was not. Dreamer had the bad music. So anyway, that ended up being an album of ECW music that was made by a guy named Harry Slash. Yeah. Yes. So we got. I think we. I don't know if it was included when we bought the library in the language in the contract. I don't know, and I think at the beginning it wasn't. So I think there was some negotiation with Harry, and then I think we finally reached an agreement, and that way we would, and any stuff that we pulled out, we go back and put it back in. The other stuff, yeah, I think it's too so. It's kind of a twofold thing. I think, yes, it would be too expensive, especially if it's a really popular piece like JYD, right? To Another One Bites the Dust, right? That was his Mid-South theme.
Yes.
And Mid-South had a lot of that too. They had every one of their entrances was bad. So those shows were not easy to produce, including the opening theme. So you would have to take out the opening theme, and then the tricky part was the opening theme went over the announcers for the opening on camera for 10 seconds or whatever it was. So you just have to bury it. You just have to, you cut it out all the way through the opening graphics and everything, and then just bury the rest. And as long as you can still hear the announcers, right? That's the idea. And you could never hear the other music. So it worked out fine. Sometimes it was, a little bit worse than others. So that, again, that would be a case that maybe you go to your audio guy and be like, hey, can we fix this up a tad? But yeah, I think cost consuming, and B, it got so complicated from a legal standpoint because some of these libraries were 20, 30, 40 years old, and they were using these songs over and over and over and over again. And these artists or groups never knew it. And they could come calling for every single cent every time that song aired, and we'd be screwed. We would have to pay out the wazoo, for stuff like that. So I think that's the simplest answer I can give.
When you're talking about acquiring these different libraries, you said I went out and I acquired this one and that one. I mean, are you handling the negotiations and reaching out and starting the initial dialogue, or when did I tag you in?
Definitely not going to take credit for that, but my job was, I think so whoever was handling that part of it, would come to us, come to me and be like, or they would send something, email, I don't remember how it was, and say, basically, okay, we got looks like we got Mid-South secured. We've already had the negotiation, and we've taken care of the pay. We're going to send payment, so it's all set. But I want you to before that happens, before we go through with it, the idea was that I was to go there and check out everything about the library. How is the physical tape itself? How's the playback? Do we have major video or audio issues across the board? How's the talent? Is it A level, B level, C level? Because we're not going to pay them X amount if it's C level talent across the board. How is it stored? Is it in a storage facility because the tapes and the film and all that stuff is very sensitive. It gets in heat, the heat that we're having here in the Northeast, you're done for, right? So you got to make sure that that's on the up and up and everything's good with that. So that was basically it. And then I would come back, I would write a report, I would send it and say, I think this is well worth it. Yes, I approve. Everything looks good. And then they would go forward and buy it. And then they would, and then eventually they would ship it up to the TV studio. And then the librarians would do their thing and input it and do whatever. And then, like I said, later on in the day, it all got digitized and the tapes were irrelevant anyway. But yeah, that's how that works. So no, I was definitely not negotiating or handshaking any deals with any old promoters. I was just there to make sure we were getting the bang for our buck that we thought we were.
Whose tapes were in the best condition that you recall?
I mean, World Class had some good ones, but they had some bad ones too. Like they had it at a central facility, but then there was some other ones that were stored in the old on the Von Erich Ranch, which was 150 degrees. But there was I think everybody was pretty much on. CWF was good. We did two different CWF. So CWF, we had one was with one was with the Steve Kern part, which he owned later in the CWF run. Those were pretty good as I recall. And then Mike Graham, right? So Mike Graham, obviously Eddie Graham ran the promotion way back when. And that was just an awesome, like that didn't, I feel like that library, and again, that was stored very, very well. And Mike was, God rest his soul. Mike was a really good guy, and he was very proud of the library and very proud of the whole promotion and all of that, as he should be. But that had so much. There was so much stuff, and I feel like it gets overlooked a lot because it was very difficult to put up on the network just because the shows were so good and interesting, but they were so choppy. So a lot of it was just like Gordon Soley would be here, and then he would throw to a segment, and then there would be another segment, and then more Gordon. It was just kind of all over the place. So it was difficult to put up as a full show. But there were some moments that were quality that we certainly used in bits and pieces. But yeah, I don't remember anything being very poor per se. Again, the only library that I was involved with that we actually didn't buy, which was an old kind of an old AWA spinoff in Indianapolis run by Dick the Bruiser.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. I think it was just star quality that was not great. I think that was the main, because I mean, we clearly went there and watched it, and they were nice folks down there and a whole bit. I mean, he was obviously passed away by then, but yeah, they were all stored, in a facility, and we went through all of it, and I think it was just a star power issue. Nothing against them. I think that if I recall that correctly. But yeah, I think most of them were stored in pretty good. Like I said, the only thing there was the Kevin had cans of film in that barn that basically disintegrated when we opened them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, we salvaged some. We salvaged some good ones actually too. But he had all kinds of old memorabilia in there and stuff. It was really cool because I grew up really at Von Erich. When I was a kid, it was the first thing that I saw outside of the old WWF right back then. World Class became syndicated I grew up in Boston, so the World Class became syndicated in the Boston area, and we were like all kinds of stoked, my friends and I, and we fell in love with the Von Erichs at World Class. So for me to get to be chummy with Kevin was really kind of fun, and be on the Von Erich Ranch, holy cow, But yeah, and that's another thing I didn't mention is actually what we did, that I told you about those history shows. We did the history of WCW was Kevin and Michael P.S. Hayes were my hosts for that show. So talk about authentic, talk about the guys who walk the walk, right? You can't get any better than that. And I know Michael very, very well. I've known him for years. He also did commentary for me on some of those syndicated shows. But yeah, like I said, that's basically how it went down. And like I said, we tried to make polish them off and put them on the air and get people and we did. I mean, let's face it, after the first year, we had 1 million subscribers on the network, and the other stuff did too, like anything else. And, like I said, not just the shows that we made, but like anything that went in VOD, like there was there was Spanish announced shows. There was like somehow I was approving Portuguese shows, and I don't speak a lick of either one of those. But anything that went through that had to go up in VOD had to somehow pass through me in some way, shape, or form. So whether they were, like I said, those kind of off the main drag shows, or like package shows, or whatever it was. So that was another job that I had daily to be part of. And then by the end of my tenure, VOD had just kind of almost been phased out, because we hit the main goal, and then that was kind of it. And the team got pulled in a few different directions, so it only ended up being me and one or two other folks at the end of the day, because we were only producing at that time. Like, remember I told you 250 hours, we were doing like 25 hours. That's it. So that was just kind of how that turned out. But they started doing some newer shows and some different spins, and they roundtable and this and that and the other thing, and then NXT UK started, and that was a thing, and so that was kind of how that went down. But I don't know.
When you were getting everything ready for the network originally, were there any moments or situations or talent or circumstances that you knew it was going to be a company initiative to just delete and remove from the network? Like, if we had it to do over again, we wouldn't have done this. So we're not going to post it on the network. I know that as soon as it loaded, there's a pretty famous Booker T interview from Spring Stampede in '97, I believe.
Oh, sure, there is. Yeah.
And I was surprised when the network became a thing all over Twitter and social. People were like, they left it in. And I'm curious, were there other circumstances or situations you can recall where it was like, hey, we'd like to be authentic, but we can't leave that in?
Oh, for sure. I mean, but especially on classics. I mean, classics, we definitely did that. Like, there was none of that. If there was anything like that, it came out no matter what. And there was a huge thing for a long period of time, again, until the network started, is anything Chris Benoit was out.
Right.
Out. And it was like, we searched for that stuff. We were very careful with that stuff. All of our shows certainly got a QC by the producer, whoever the producer was after and by that quality control. So you watch the show from start to finish with, completely focused and making sure nothing was missed. And we've come back where there's a situation that there was, and thank God we went through that process, and what we would do was, it wouldn't be the person. What we would usually do is we would swap, like, you would QC my show, I would QC your show.
I got you.
Like that, you know what I mean? So you get a fresh set of eyes, because I've been looking at the show now for 5 days. Now you get it, and you tell me if it's good or not. But yeah, there's certainly circumstances, a lot of those circumstances, a lot that there was like, we're going to pull that out, or that segment never happened, or there was some other excuse me, there was some other important stuff that has to be salvaged, so we'd have to kind of figure out ways to cut around it and just make it the best you could. Like I've told people many times, you had to figure out, just as a simple example, you had to figure out sometimes, so how do I get from A to C while I have to lose B? And you'd have to find out, how do I make these segments mesh together and look like it's natural, and look like I'm not catching something from the thing I just took out? Because sometimes depending on the dissolve, we call it, like, that's in between, right? When you fade in between two shots, if the dissolve was too long on either end, you'd get the back end of what you cut out, and you'd be like, oh crap, I can't do that. Let me put it this way. Same on the other end. You get from the previous segment, you'd end up getting a bad piece of thing that you didn't want in your segment. Sometimes it was in between. If you did a center cut, you'd see pieces of it in between, and you'd have to just shore it up, make sure that didn't look like that when it aired.
Can you think of any other examples besides Chris Benoit of things that, hey, we can't air that? Like, the only thing I remembered off the top of my head is Booker T and Chris Benoit, but I'm sure there's others.
Let me see if I can think of anything. Like Attitude Era stuff,
I got you.
Certainly, I think, there was times where we had to really check, really keep our eye on the language, especially from Steve, and like, I definitely know we lost some diva stuff that was just too over the top, sexual, kind of thing. Stuff like that. Trying to think what else. Like, there was some there was debate, certainly, um, on some, which I think, I don't think ever happened, but there was debate, and the one I can think of off the top of my head is, if you remember, there was a match at you talked about being an ECW guy. There was an ECW match with Bill Alfonso.
Oh, he bled everywhere against Beulah.
Like you wouldn't believe.
Buckets. Yes.
Okay, that's just one of the worst I've ever seen.
The worst.
I think we may have pulled that out, or we may have negotiated and been like, no, we'll just call it MA and let it go. As long that was the thing with the network. We got classics was not, like I said before, was not like that. If it was controversial or it was bad, it came out. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But with the network, everything was more loosey goosey. We had the TVMA thing. We were going to use. Like here's another thing that I used to handle at the end, which was, and you see a lot of these guys on the main rosters now, like your Dragunovs and your Joe Hendry and the Gallus boys, those folks, all the UK guys, basically. So we were getting all these UK tapes. So there was and one where Gunther first started, which was WXW of Germany. So we had WXW, we had Insane Championship Wrestling. What was the other one?
Progress for a minute.
Progress, thank you. Progress. So Progress was England, and I think ICW was Ireland. But all those guys were on the show. Any of the UK guys that you see now today were all on those shows. So those shows used to come in, and I had to handle those too, because we had made, in the last like 5 years before I left, we had made agreements with those 3 promotions that we would air their shows on our network for X amount of dollars or whatever it was. So those shows would all come in, and they weren't easy either, because they used a lot of copyrighted music also. But they were unique and they were different, and I had to just QC all of them when they came in. That was my job. So anything that was no good, I just pulled it out. Or I just like most of those shows, especially in Progress, I think it might have been both ICW and Progress. The announce team, or the main, play-by-play guys were, as well as the talent. The language was off the chart. I mean, all they did was F-bomb the entire show. So I just labeled it MA and rolled it in. That's how different the network was as compared to, like I said, when we dealt with classics. But yeah, like every other word out of their mouth was
F this, F that. Yeah.
F. So I think I was going somewhere with that, and I don't know where I was going with that, but at least I got to explain that was also part of something that I was involved in, and I was lucky enough to get, like all those guys that show up now on TV, like most people out there don't know them. I know all of them, because
right.
I basically covered them for 4 or 5 years, or however long we had it. And we had all the music with them too. They sent us all spreadsheets of what the music was. And then there was, most of it was good, but there was some parts that were no good. They definitely used some real music from time to time. So those were just tricky to get out. I think we just even pulled it up, or a lot of times, like another one that I can think of is World Class. So World Class, there was no real way of getting around those, because there was a couple themes, right? So like Kerry used Tom Sawyer, right, by Rush. Rick Rude used Smooth Operator by Sade. So those, like if you go back and watch the old episodes of World Class that are on the network right now, there's not an entrance to be had, because they were so easy to pull out. And most of the other segments that didn't have music, like 90% of the talent on World Class did not have music.
Right.
So it was so easy to pull out. I'm sorry. So 90% of people talent there did not have music. So the segments would start up from break anyway, with the wrestlers in the ring announcer, the referee. That's how it started. Every segment started that didn't have music. So we just figured the ones that do have the bad music, we just make them look like all the rest of the segments in the show. Nobody's going to know any different, unless you're a hardcore fan, you know the difference. But yeah, like, so those were easy to do. And something else I wanted to touch on, when you talked about, I meant to go to it when you mentioned it. You said something along the lines of, I'm sure you've heard that before from fans saying, oh, this is just not as good anymore.
Yeah.
More times than you'll ever believe. That's and it used to drive me a little crazy because I would be like, do you guys, I understand your passion and I get it, but like, first off, it's not our fault. Like, we're just doing what we're told. And B, it would cost the company zillions of dollars, which they're not going to pay. So you're just going to have to live with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be a dick, but that's the end of the day. At the end of the day, it is what it is.
Or find it online where some
Oh,
fans.
yeah, right, exactly. Go
Original
back and be nostalgic online and enjoy yourself, but I can't give it to you. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. It's a function of business. I did want to ask you, there's this a series of silly rumors in wrestling through the years, but it was said for years and years, way pre-network, that there was like a section of the production studio or the WWE offices or whatever. These are the tapes that no one should ever see. Do you think something like that really exists?
I never saw anything like that.
Yeah.
That I can remember. I mean,
Like, I'm not trying to be that guy.
no, I hear you. I don't think that
As
was
fans, we've all heard like the Owen fall, that's on a do not open. But I mean, and granted, we don't want to see it. We shouldn't see it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But legally, they have to have a copy of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%. And yes, for an example like that, I would imagine that would be true. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that makes total logical sense to me. Like, legally, we have to retain it, but at the same time, we want to make sure this never sees the light of day. No one should see this.
Yeah, I would say that would be true. And I think it's all, I think for the most part, it's probably legit.
Right.
There could be certainly some things out there that that I don't know that could be, not legit, but I don't know that to be true. So I don't want to say.
Oh, no, I get it.
To that because I don't know.
Talk to me a little bit about, the way you would have to blur things out. So we've talked about the music, but I know that there was the change, and there's some instances where we can show the WWF logo, and then other times we have to bleep out the audio and blur the logo, like even in the turnbuckles. I've seen they Photoshop it out of old photos of belts and turnbuckles. But I've also seen like Wrestling Challenge. I think somebody maybe snuck in there and trademarked it, and now you had to go blur out the banners. Like, can you talk to us about some of those circumstances?
Sure. So Wrestling Challenge was, if I remember correctly, and again, that was a big thing. It was right in our wheelhouse. It was something we had to do. There was a promoter overseas that had a promotion called Wrestling Challenge, I believe, and he sued us and won, or something like that. So that's why that Wrestling Challenge. Yeah, we ought to all the banners are up on
Yep.
in the records. Yeah, and then if it said any graphics, we would have to, take that out. And then I'll tell you what, the WWF blurring, Conrad, was one of the most miserable times of my career.
Can't imagine.
We spent hours upon hours upon hours, and like you said, turnbuckles, flags in the arena,
Ring skirts, microphones,
referee's
belts,
jersey,
the banners in the ceiling,
exactly,
the entrance,
table,
the bumpers.
Oh my goodness! And then finally, at one point, I think we got the fat WWF okayed at the beginning. I think that was our first step, and then finally everything got cleared. But no, I'm talking about like hundreds of hours just on blur, not even producing the show, just blurring the damn show with me or any of our staff and an editor. Or we would hand off like 5 shows to the overnight editor and have him bang through them overnight, or whatever it might have been, He used to do a lot of the ECW shows for me overnight too, because there was just thousands of, I'm blowing that out of proportion, but tens of 20, 30 cuts in one ECW show that had to be done. And I would set them all up and I would just have him mix them all together overnight, because it was such a big project. But yeah, blurring was really, really, it dominated our lives for like 5 years. I mean, it was just that bad. It was those old, like the Attitude Era shows. Oh my God, a disaster. And then we had to cover up the bug too in every one of those shows.
Yes.
So getting the bug to line up sometimes was tricky. You didn't want to see it hop, and it hopped a lot. And you're like, oh, I can't do that. Let me fix it. So you had to make sure it covered it and it didn't, like, a lot of times it would go from this point over here or up here. Like I said, so you'd have to be like, no, it was torture.
Let me
Torture.
just explain to some of our listeners. The bug is when they would put the WWF logo in the bottom left-hand corner.
Sorry, yes.
Sometimes it would move to different corners, but you see it in a lot of programming. There'll be a corner and there's a logo. Well, they couldn't use that logo anymore. So now, not just every now and again, we got to look for the logo. It's on the damn show the entire time.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking 2-3 hours, depending on how long those shows were back then. Pay-per-view, same thing. Just a wreck, train wreck.
Let's talk about some of the holy grails that people were really excited to see, like the last Battle of Atlanta or the Bret Hart and Tom McGee match. Like there's
Sure.
so many of these little hidden treasures that were out there. Were there any that you were really excited about or that were a big company initiative that you can recall?
No, the Battle of Atlanta, we aired that. That aired. I don't know if it was network aired or classic.
It was on the
aired.
network with no commentary.
No commentary, exactly right. And that was a great find because we couldn't, a lot of those tapes, unfortunately were in Ole Anderson's hands, and Ole Anderson wasn't a guy who wanted anything to do with us. So we never got our hands on a lot of that stuff. We even heard rumors over the years that he, just so we wouldn't get them, he took them out in back of the arena one time, put them in a barrel and lit them on fire. I swear. So tell me, I'm sorry, give me your question again.
I was just wondering about, were there any of
gems.
the hidden grail, holy grail moments that you were excited about or the company was excited about that you can recall?
Yeah, like we had, do you remember? So we used to have, one of the guys who worked for me, a good friend, he actually did, if you look at a lot of those, and that got poo-pooed too for some reason, which it was wildly successful, was he did the segment on the network called Hidden Gems.
Yes.
So those were, but he was perfect for it because he's a big wrestling guy like I am, hardcore historian of the business, passionate about the company, loves the industry. So those were perfect. And he used to work really hard finding those things. I don't remember a lot of them off the top of my head, but they're all up on the network. I know that. Was there ones that the company was really, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Let me just think about it for another couple minutes.
And while you're thinking about that, I want to ask you a little bit about, when you're watching some of the network stuff back, you'll see something that will say something like presented in the most possible complete form or whatever. And
yeah, I made that.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, I assume that means that the original was maybe damaged, but it does sometimes feel like as a viewer, I can tell a difference in the quality. And it makes me wonder, did you find that from someone who had a home video, someone who recorded the pay-per-view? Did you rip it offline somewhere where a fan had posted it? Like, how would you try to stitch things together if you ever had to do that at all?
Uh-huh. So a lot of those, like, again, and I go back to WCCW just because it was my, it's my baby. A lot of those shows have it because they were damaged. Yeah. So what would happen was either the audio would be, you have that funky audio because it's out of, it's not working properly. The tape machine was bad, or the tape, whatever. And then a lot of it was like wavy lines on the screen, up on the top of the screen or on the bottom, or even some black cutouts in the middle of matches, here and there, so and there was nothing we could do about it, really, is what we were saying. We were saying, we really want to show this because it's really cool stuff, but there's nothing we can do about the quality. We apologize. That was basically our message with those graphics that we're talking about. And the other thing was, yes, did we get some stuff online? Yes. All the old, and again, this was my buddy Eric I was just talking about. He was kind of in charge of this stuff because he knew a lot of the online folks and things of that nature. So all the old ECW that we didn't have physically tapes of for whatever reason, either they got lost or damaged or whatever. I'm talking about like early 90s and stuff of that nature, when they first started and all that kind of thing. All those fancy show, they're, I don't know if they were even pay-per-views, but all some of their big, uh, three-way dance or heat wave or it wasn't the like heat wave was one of the main ones, but there were others that were really shows that nobody had ever seen, but somebody out there had them on tape or on DVD or something of that nature. So yes, we all the old ECW quote pay-per-views were all bought from people online.
I wanted to ask you too, when we're taking a look at the old network stuff, I'm a nostalgia guy. That's really what ad free shows is all about. So I love watching the old stuff more than I even enjoyed the new stuff. But I've heard through the grapevine
100%. Yep.
that percentage wise, the archives don't get nearly the traffic that the new stuff does, that the new stuff just dwarfs the old stuff. Is that true?
I think so. And that irritated me for years because I mean, that's my job. That's my job. I'm trying to make this the star of the show, and why sometimes there was stuff that was, frankly, not interesting or not great. And they would still trump the old stuff that was awesome, but again, it's hard because like I said, like I'm a historian of the business. I love all that stuff. That's why I was glad that I had that position. And that was just, I think that's just the way it always, because, I guess, the audience is made up mostly of folks that are watching the product today. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, a lot of people, I guess aren't as invested, other than the current everyday product,
When you take a look at what's happening with the network, I mean, it was the new initiative. I mean, we folded the tent on pay-per-view after Vince McMahon had really been the king of pay-per-view for decades at that point.
right?
And so to hear that not just there are other pay-per-views, but even WrestleMania and Royal Rumble and SummerSlam, they were all going to be included when ultimately they made the deal to move it to Peacock. Was that disappointing to you? Did you feel like, man, I'm losing a part of my career here because it's going, or did you not view it that way? Was there any pride of ownership, I guess, in the network?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it was, it was a smart move, the right move for the company. I mean, they, from a financial standpoint. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that was that was ours. We owned that. That was our thing. We did all the work. We put all that stuff up there. And yeah, I guess you could say that it was such a big deal that we had this network, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It didn't even exist anymore. So that was, yeah, definitely good question. I would say that's probably true.
When you were trying to grow the network, we read, if you were reading any of the industry trades like Wade Keller or Dave Meltzer, there was always speculation that the network never really hit the initial projections. Where they hoped to be and where they were two different numbers. Do you remember internally there being a push? Hey team, we got to get to so and so. What was that number?
I mean, the only thing that we had, like I said, which I already explained to you, was like viewership,
Yes.
subscribers. I mean,
Yes.
I think subscribers, I think 2 million was a number I think that I recall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how close we ended up getting to that.
I always heard between 2 million and 2.5, depending on who you believe.
Yeah,
That's where they really wanted to be, but
Yeah,
they
I think
never
that's
quite got there.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't know what the final number ended up being before it went to Peacock. I don't even remember when it went, if it went to Peacock. When do we know when it went to Peacock?
I think it was 2001, April 2001.
No, it network.
Oh,
Went
the
to Peacock.
network launched in 2014,
No, I know that when it launched, but it went to Peacock when? 2020?
April of 2021.
Oh, April of 2021. So I wasn't even there. I wasn't even at the company when that happened. So
Right.
um so yeah, I mean, I guess I just remember it from afar. So I guess, I obviously can't speak to the internal reaction because like I said, I wasn't there. So I don't know. Nobody was even in the office then yet anyway. So it would have been just folks' reaction online and from home. because they didn't go back. They didn't go back even part-time until July of 01. I mean, of 21.
Did you mentioned that you're a nostalgia fan yourself. You grew up a wrestling fan?
Yes, sir.
Who were your favorites growing up?
I love the old steel, like Andre, uh, Sarge. I love the old championship shows. I watched them all the time at home when I was a kid. And then like everybody became a Hogan fan because that's just the way it was. But like I liked, like I said, I really got on board with the Von Erichs. They were like my guys, in a non WWF situation. I'm trying to think of like some of the other guys. Like, I mean, I loved Saturday Night's Main Event. That was like my favorite. I loved those shows. Those shows were difficult too because that music was no good either.
Right.
And even the package, one that I could. Well, I don't want to say anything, but there was one package in there that was very, very famous. I think it was like a recap of 1988, whatever. I don't even know, but again, it was easy to get out because there was no VO. But there was a very famous, at that time, piece of music in there that they did for that. But I love those shows. Those were so fun, and I mean they were so goofy, but they were so. I mean, just good stuff. Like Randy was great, and Tito Santana I liked Ivan Putski, for WWF guys, like those guys. I was fascinated with, then I got fascinated with some of the heels, like when Stan Hansen would come through, or Superstar, those guys were always good. I loved Lou, I like Lou Albano.
Who were you excited to meet the first time?
The managers were great. I met Lou. I met Freddie. I worked with Freddie a couple of times. Lassie. Who was I excited to meet? Like I loved. I worked with John a bunch of times, but meeting Cena at the beginning was great. And he was nothing but tremendous to me the entire time. Like I said, we worked together. I think specifically on like 3 or 4 different projects. I think I did one when we went to his gym where he grew up. If you remember any of these pieces, shot down at a NASCAR race that he like emceed. I think him and I shot at, what the heck? There was another one that was, my favorite of all time, because we're both Boston guys, that he threw the first pitch at Fenway.
Yeah.
Year after they won the World Series, and him and I were mumbling, bumbling idiots sitting in the Red Sox dugout trying to figure out how the hell did we get here. This is awesome.
That's awesome.
So that was a fun day. Yeah. I got a have the picture up at my house still with John and I
in the dugout
in front of the Green Monster.
That's awesome.
That's actually it's my LinkedIn background picture.
Oh wow, I gotta go check that out. Tell me a little bit about working with Kevin Dunn. I feel like he gets a bad rap from fans online a lot of times.
It was hard. It was never easy. Certainly, he was, certainly had a high bar. At times I didn't like it, to be honest. Our relationship was good. Good for the most part. I mean, we had a couple of ups and downs, but I mean, we had, we also had some times where we had some fun, after the show where we would, hang out in a group, and he would be part of that, and it was fine. But yeah, it was hard, and you know what? Yeah, there was a lot of things there that it's difficult because there were things maybe that were handled differently than I would have handled them personally. There were certainly some policies that were, maybe some things that not all of us agreed with. But he was the boss, so it was what it was. And a lot of the people, there's certainly some people there that are still there that were, grew up through Kevin and may have some of the same qualities that, again, that I may not necessarily agree with, but, that's just kind of how we just kind of rolled with it from day to day, depending on, and I never, it wasn't like I worked a lot for KD directly. I did, like I said, I had a little tenure on the road, so that would be my closest interaction with him as far as in a professional environment. Well, he was around a couple times when we would do some shoots that were very, very important. So, I mean, and then, there was other times where we would have, like I said, have some fun after a show, and we used to have old production meetings back in the day, and I have a great story that I'll tell. So Katie used to run every time they come back from the road. Kevin would run the production meeting in our television building upstairs in the conference room, and it would be like all the people who were producers basically. And he would give a recap of the week, and then we would go through different things, and people would have questions and whatever. So KD is a very, very big Raider fan. Okay, so I'm a big Patriots fan.
Okay.
So there was a thing. So we're leading up to the snow game, right? The
Tuck Rule. Yeah, right? 2001.
Yes, sir. So now 2001. So I've been to the company for 3.5 years ish, right? He knows me well enough by now. Fine. So Stephanie McMahon used to go to the production meetings as well. And Steph and I got to be pretty close because we were both big Patriots fans, and we both went to school down the street from each other in downtown Boston. I went to Emerson College. She went to BU. So I told Steph before the meeting, I said, Steph, listen, underneath my work clothes, I have my Tom Brady jersey on. Okay. So at the end, he's going to ask, does anybody else have any questions? And Coach was in on this too. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to say, hey, Kev, we'll see you this weekend. And I'm going to rip my work shirt off and spin around. Will you have my back? She said, I got your back. So we went through the meeting, and I was dying inside because I thought, am I really going to do that? And I did it. And everybody popped, everybody laughed. And he looked right at me and he goes, you know what, Carlan, I'm telling you right now. If they win this game, I'm telling you right now, your ass is fired. Which of course never happened. It was just all in good fun. But it was great. It was that was my one of the fun interaction moments with KD for sure. But yeah, he's certainly controversial, no question. And a lot of that's outside stuff is inaccurate, but a lot of it is accurate.
You're saying, well, like one of the things I see a lot of criticism about is that he was sort of paint by numbers. Like you knew, hey, when someone gets thrown to the outside, they're going to go to commercial break. And you knew that whenever there's action in the HD era, like live punches or what have you, we're going to do a lot of cuts. And I've seen a lot of commentary recently on WWE since he's been gone that, man, it feels like they're trying new shots, like the above the ring shot when Braun Breaker runs around to do a spear, and that continuous shot that goes from the backstage area through Gorilla, through the curtain, but you're behind the talent the entire time.
Yep.
I've seen a lot of people say, hey, this is because Kevin Dunn is gone. Would you agree with that?
I would, again, I'm not trying to be slanderous to KD. I'm not, but I think that's probably accurate. And I think I've heard that through some folks that I know that still work for the company.
These days, Mike Mansory is running things production wise for AEW. What was your experience like working with Mike?
Mike and I have always been good friends. And again, I never worked directly for him or anything like that because, he was a different position and he was on, he was mainly on the road at those once he got, cooking, and I was way off the road by then. But like I've known Mike a long time. We've been very close. He was actually the first person that I spoke with. One of the first people I spoke with when I lost my job and I took, 6 months later, I finally got kickstarted up on LinkedIn and started the networking and all that other stuff. He was one of the first guys I just reached out to as many people as I could, and he actually answered, and we had a great conversation on the phone, and he was at that time he was going over to Japan to do the boxing.
Fighting. Yeah.
One, yeah. And then he left one right at, like a year, I think. And then I kind of lost touch with him, and I don't know why. Like a lot of people have bad things to say about Mansouri. I don't.
I don't either. He's been great to me.
We have a tremendous Red Sox Yankee rivalry that we always have a lot of fun with. But yeah, I've kind of lost touch with him. I've reached out on a handful of occasions, and even thoughts about possible employment, and I can't seem to track him down. And I don't know if he's just too busy these days, or but like something happened. I don't know if something on my end, or I definitely texted him a couple of times, after some of the shows were over, just telling him what a great show it was, and I don't know if that was too late or if that was something that I did that was wrong, but I can't seem to get him to I can't seem to get him to answer me. I don't know. I like I said, I got nothing but respect for the guy, and we've been nothing but friendly for our entire time we've known each other. So
some of the other names that people are familiar with listening to this are guys like David Sahadi. I realize it would have been probably a while since you worked with him, but he's in the news because he recently left TNA and he's working with Major League Wrestling now. What was your experience like working with Mr. Sahadi?
I did not see that. Dave's great. Love Dave. We always had a good time. Again, I didn't work directly for him or with him a lot because he was in a completely different department. He ran our promotions department. He did used to walk around the building in a bathrobe from time to time, so that was like Hugh Hefner like. But always happy-go-lucky, hard worker. Did some really creative stuff. Did a lot of stuff with Steve that was huge back then. One thing I can remember off the top of my head, he used to always use us in the promo spots, so to save money on talent, outside talent. So I did a Christmas shoot with him one year. We talked about Freddie Blassie earlier. So Freddie, of course, at this point is like 85 years old, and this is an attitude era. This is an attitude era situation because we had Freddie posing as we did it in the main tower, the old, now not the main building anymore, in 1241, in the lobby. And Freddie was playing, this was it was a Christmas spot for, like, I don't know if it was shop.com or whatever it was, or Shop Zone back then. And Freddie was like bad Santa, like dirty Santa. And I was one of the people in line waiting to take my kid to see Santa, and did the old horrified when he did something sexual or something horrible. It was a very attitude era spot.
Yes,
just totally vulgar and totally. Then the stripper showed up with the giant cans hanging out of her little red outfit. And Freddie would say, "Oh, look at those." It was. And I was the father that went, that deal. So yeah, Dave produced that, certainly directed it. And that had to be like 2000 maybe. So yeah, Dave's a great guy. Never had a problem with Dave. We would go out from time to time too. We have a couple beers and hang out, and it was always fun. I got along with those promo guys a lot back then.
Some other names that work behind the scenes that you may be familiar with, some of our listeners might not. Did you spend any time working with Chris Chambers or Adam Panucci?
Of course. So Chambers, I know him for the whole time. He's always, he's a great guy. He is, and he's certainly a very, very high up person now, always has been since I've known him. But he stepped away for a while and then came back. And I think I might have stepped away again. I'm not sure. I know he's not, he definitely was sitting near me in the end of my tenure. Like, his office was right near me where I sat. And he ultimately was our upper boss at that time during the network era. He didn't do very much, he didn't have very much interaction with us, but if we needed to go that high, he was our guy. And those shows that I mentioned to you, the syndicated shows that I ended up producing, Chris always, I would pick out theme music for those shows, and Chris was the guy that I would always have to approve the theme music. So those themes that came out of those two shows were collaboration between he and I. And I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, and we've hung out too outside, and been to his. We actually went to a party one time at his home 100 years ago. Um, and he's one of the really old school guys. He's been there, way before I was. Um, and Adam, I've known my entire tenure. The only time I really, well, that's not true. So a couple times, like I would pinch hit every now and then. So I worked on Raw a few times, when they needed extra help, cutting a package. And for those people who know what that is, right? A package, you just highlights or the rivalry or a certain superstar or whatever, or cold open, we call it, right? Is the thing you see at the open, which might be a recap of last week's show or something. So I did some of that for Adam. I entrance. I did when I was young. All the PAs would cut the entrance videos. The videos that play in the Tron when the talent comes down. They were always cut by us, the PAs. So I did that, and that was always approved by him. And then at one point, he was approving one of the he was my, I don't know why. I don't think he was my boss per se, but he was in charge of the syndicated shows. So when I would put together the syndicated show, I would go up to his office, him and I would have a discussion. I would show him the rundown. I would tell him what my vision was. He would give me some tips, or he would tell me, hey, that's great, or why don't we go in this direction, that kind of thing. We always had a good relationship. We were the same. We're the same age, so we're in the same era, and certainly not afraid to bust your balls, which was fine. It was fun, all in good fun. Still cranking it at a high level right now, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the hiring process, because when you were talking about Kevin Dunn earlier, I wondered, would he have been someone that you would have interviewed with back in '98, or how does that process work?
Yeah, no, I don't think Kevin was ever involved in the hiring process. I don't think, unless it was somebody very high. And I don't know that for sure. I don't.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, no, it was weird. I don't even remember. I got my first interview was by a guy named John Arnold. Now John Arnold hasn't been with the company in 20 years or more, but like JTA, he wasn't even, that's what we call him. He wasn't even like an executive or a hiring manager or anything. He just kind of oversaw the library. I think that was his main gig. So I don't know how my first interview came with him and how I advanced to the next section, which ended up being, I ended up interviewing with, Mike. Anyway, and if I think of it, I'll tell you. And he was never part of everyday production either. I had nothing to do with him for the rest of my career ever. So that was kind of weird. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking back in those days, but that's how it went down, and I got hired. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, neither one of those guys had anything to do with our side of the production team at all. So it was a little weird, but that's how it went down.
Any good Jim Johnston stories you can share with us?
Mike Grossman. That's the guy. That's the guy.
Okay. What about Jim Johnston? I heard you mention his name earlier. I think a lot of us listening to this, we grew up on his themes. We think he's such an important part of WWE history. It's crazy to think that he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame. And it's even crazier to think that after all those years, he was no longer with WWE. Just felt like he was a lifer. What can you tell us, if anything, about Mr. Johnston?
Love Jim. Jim was great. Nicest guy. Very quiet, but super nice. And like I said, from the example that I used earlier, if you needed something from him, all over it. And you'd have it the next day, no matter who you were, and he was great to me. There was more than one experience. I talked to you about TNT, that he did for me, he would just say, what do you need? What's the theme? What's it look like? What's it sound like? Give me plenty of cut, and he would either try to mirror it and get it as close as possible, or we'd go in a totally different direction, depending on what it was, yeah, uber talented. I mean, there's nothing a guy couldn't do. I mean, we had, there was even at one point, because that was another thing with the music. We would go through a lot of, on second time through, a lot of people, the new like music group would be like, wow, X, Y, and Z themes that Jim did are way too close to the real ones. They have to come out and we have to redo them. Like that stuff happened. And that happened, a good handful of times for sure. But like I said, no matter who you were, he would always take your call, he would always take your email, and he would always get you what you needed within 24 hours. So no matter how high he ended up getting, that's not who he was.
Let's talk about your experience working with some of the announcers. You mentioned that you were a floor manager, and you said you got a chance to do that some for JR. What was it like working with JR?
The first time around, a little bumpy, because we didn't know one another real well, and I could have been just some random kid, that didn't know what he was doing. But like later on, yeah, definitely bumpy, but later on, great. I mean, we became very friendly. He ended up, him and Mean Gene ended up splitting, and I didn't bring this up earlier. Our most watched and most famous show on Classics was our Legends Roundtable.
The best.
Yeah, that was my favorite. I was the stage manager and the producer.
Okay.
So I produced that. And I wasn't we all produced it. It was a huge effort between our team because it was very, very hard to do those shows, but we loved the shows. KD used to sit in on those a lot. But those were very, very fun. So JR and Gene would split as hosts depending on who was available. So I became very, very much closer with JR then and very much more, we understood each other very much more better, but very much more than we did, I would say at the outset. Not that he ever gave me a hard time. It just, he was, sometimes hard to talk to, a little bit, abrasive, but like, who the hell am I? So, but yeah, I definitely work with him and the King and, certainly more than one occasion.
Anybody ever actually bring Pat Patterson coffee on one of those shoots?
100%. Yes. So we had a room set up, like a little conference room set up outside of the studio. So that studio was down the street. That studio was not at 120. That was not at the TV facility. It was actually in the building where A&E and the Yes Network are.
Okay.
On Harbor Drive in down by the water. It's different. And there was a room next to the studio that we had. We had catering first, so we would all eat in the next room over, and then into the conference room was like where all the drinks were, right? And there was a variety of things, and some of them maybe have been alcoholic as well, but it is what it is. But yeah, there was anything you want, juice and coffee and beer and whatever. And those are fun. Those are, but Conrad, to edit one of those shows was a tall task, because back then we didn't have the ingest system that I had mentioned earlier. Like all the tapes are digitized now. You just call them up on your screen. You don't have to worry about. We literally, my colleague and I, who were basically the number twos in the department, we would have to go to the library with a massive carry, like with what the hell is the name? It was
a road case
made for tapes, but it had, had a wheel on it, and you could, and load the thing up with 50, 60, 70 tapes, depending on what the topic was that we needed to cover. And then you would have to take each one of those tapes, put it in the machine, put your in, put your out, take the clip you wanted, put it in your bin, then take another tape and do the same thing. And we would be there all night. Like I'm talking about overnight doing this before you even got to start the edit, like that. So that's how long, that's how far we've come from that. But those were good times.
The rumor
we were shocked actually that they didn't pick it up and put it on the network. We were shocked.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know to this day, because it was by far our most popular show and people loved it.
Yes.
Because it was like as much behind the curtain as you could possibly get at that stage of the game.
Absolutely. I've heard a famous story that perhaps uh, Pat Patterson liked vodka with orange juice and occasionally would order a coffee or ask for a coffee or an orange juice or whatever. And if one of the new PAs that day didn't know that that was code, he'd be like, "What the hell is this?" Because
Yeah, I think
that tickled me that everyone's drinking out of a coffee cup. So that's what you think it is. But
right,
then you
right.
realize, oh no, there's lots of stuff in this coffee.
There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, JR definitely liked him some.
Crown Royal.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. We talked about working with JR. Of course, one of the things that we've heard through the years is that Vince producing and the announcers in their headset was pretty brutal. When you were on a headset, could you hear all that too, or what's your
No.
feed you're getting?
No. There's different channels. Okay. So like I was never on any channel that Vince was on.
I
I
got
would
you.
just hear Kevin.
Got it.
And then like other people backstage
Mm-hmm.
that like would we be talking to Kevin or talking to each other. But like Vince had his own channel. I never heard Vince.
Gotcha. When you're, I mean, you were there a long time. Did you spend any time at all with Vince, or is it just a separate lane?
No, sure. Not a lot, but I mean, yeah, we did. I know one occasion, I'm trying to think of a couple, like I definitely had, certainly had some interaction with him on the road, not a lot, but here and there, when we'd be doing like the rehearsals and stuff. Good and bad. Then there was, I mean, I'm sure you remember, we did the very first halftime heat
Yes.
with Mick and
In the
Rock.
empty arena. Yeah.
That's right. So Vince was on the call that day from the studio. We produced Vince that day in the studio.
So the match was taped, but the commentary was live.
It was live. Yeah. So we did. So I was with Vince all day that day. We interacted quite a bit, but like not much more than that. Like I would see him here and there, or he would come by and shake your hand, or like I remember the last anniversary. I guess it was my 20th anniversary. We used to do a party every year to celebrate the anniversaries of employees. And I think it was my 20th anniversary. And for whatever reason, I don't know, our class was up, and he was like, hey, pal, that's his shtick. Hey, pal, why don't you come over here? Stand right next to me. And I was like, oh, okay, Vince. Sure. Do you even know my name? But sure, I'll do that. So there, I have my great 20th anniversary picture right next to Vince. So it was kind of cool.
That is cool. What was your first impression of Vince?
Like I said, I mean, I didn't really interact with him much at the beginning. I mean,
Were you intimidated by him? We've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, he's intimidating."
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. If you weren't intimidated by Vince, then I don't know who you would be. I mean, yes, 100%. And I know, he was, very intense and very purposeful and had a lot of entrenched ways. Certainly his way or the highway would certainly happen more than one occasion. I mean, that's true. But he owns the company, man. He is who he was who he was. But I never had any, certainly you're intimidated. Yes. But like, I never remember anything, that I was like, wow, I'm afraid, or I hate that.
Right.
Something like that.
How was your experience with Linda? Did you have much interaction with her?
Some, I mean, like, we would see each other every now and then, like at a party, company party, and she would come by and talk to everybody, or like I saw her a couple of times on the campaign trail, like when I was actually voting, she was at the building, so we said hello and, whatever. But like, not much more than that, just like if she would come over to the studio or something, we would all, maybe say hello or whatever, but nothing of any consequence.
What was your experience like working with Hunter?
I mean, I shot with him a few times on the road. He was always, yeah, I mean, he was always good to me. I never had a problem with Hunter. I mean, we got along fine. We didn't, it's not like we knew each other real well. But I definitely did a couple of 2 or 3 shoots with him. I know one time we were doing like some kind of behind the scenes thing or something I think it was for Classics. And like, he said hello, he recognized me, but he was like, he didn't, he was looking to figure out like where he was supposed to go or something. And I was just shooting and I was like, hey, Hunter, I don't know. And he wasn't all that pleased that I didn't know where to send him, but it was like, dude, I don't know where you're supposed to go. It's not my deal.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's about it. I don't think we, like he came, one of my favorite moments was he came. So when he first, got the massive, calf injury or whatever he tore right off the back of his leg.
His quad. Yeah, that's right.
Quad. Sorry. Yeah. So he did the quad and so that we did all the rehab packages and all the, the music videos and the whole bit. And then he had that moment at MSG, right?
Yes.
Which was, one of the great moments, that you'll see. And he actually came, I told you about those production meetings that we used to have, that I did the Patriots thing.
Yes.
He showed up that week at the production meeting and thanked us all a million times over to helping him get back into the spotlight and helping him get to that moment. And he welled up, which was pretty emotional.
That's awesome.
And pretty cool, so I never forget that moment. That was a pretty cool deal.
That's very cool.
And just couldn't say how many times he wanted to thank us.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. What about his wife, Stephanie? Did you spend any time with her? How was she?
Well, like I told you, I mean, we had a good relationship because we were Patriots fans, and she's had my back in that critical moment. Yeah, we interacted a lot. Not a lot. That's not true. But like anytime I saw Steph, no matter when it was or where it was or how long it had been since we've seen each other, I always got the hug. So I thought, I'm doing something right. I think Stephanie McMahon remembers me every time, even though I haven't seen her in 5 years. I'll take it. I must be out there in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, she was always great. I mean, we always had a lot of fun when we were around each other, and like I said, it wasn't all that much, but when I did see her, it was always smiles and how are you? How's everything?
What was your relationship like with Shane, and were you surprised when he walked away from WWE?
I was. I didn't have much of a relationship with Shane. I had a couple of interactions on the road, but those were kind of intense producing backstage segment kind of things. So everybody was kind of at a high level. So like, I didn't hold anything against him. It was just the way that he was producing the segment, which is fine. I was just there to help. But I never had anything really bad or really good. I mean, like I said, our interaction was very, very, very small. I think I remember he came over to where our desks were one time for something to talk to Coach, I think, and we interacted for a short period of time, but that was like once. But so nothing really stands out for Shane and I.
Sometimes when somebody walks away from the business, like Tony Schiavone comes to mind, he just doesn't watch anymore. It's like it doesn't really exist. It's in the rearview mirror. And he doesn't say it, but I think it would have been painful for him to watch because he wishes he would have been a part of it. And he feels like in an alternate universe, maybe he would have. And I know Bruce Pritchard has told me something similar to that before, that, after some convention appearance, his Brother Love, he threw his Brother Love suit in the Galveston Bay. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he thought wrestling was in his rear view. And of course, now he's back.
Right.
Are you still able to watch and enjoy wrestling, or do you still have some different feelings about it?
No, like if I could walk back in there tomorrow, I would.
Okay.
I love the business. Like I told you, I love the business, and I'm a historian, and I loved my time there. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to a couple of guys that I'm, like I said, I'm still friendly with about a possible job opportunity as of like this the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
But I that would certainly yes. Do I watch? Yes. My 2 of my sons are one of them in particular is hyper into it. like he's 25 now, and he's more passionate about wrestling today than he was when he was 10. And I was taking him to shows and getting him memorabilia and having Zack Ryder sign a shirt that says, "You're my broski of the week, Jack."
That's awesome.
So he's super into it. So like we watched both PLEs over the weekend. And my middle one is he's 19. He's not as much, but he's definitely into it because he watched both of the PLAs too. So so yeah, it's on. You know, we watch Monday, we watch Raw and SmackDown. I'm not gonna lie, it's on. I mean, I'm doing other things, but I'm in and out of the room, and then we do flip on AEW from time to time just to give it a look and see how it's cooking. So
what do you think of AEW?
What's that?
What do you think of AEW?
I think it's okay. They got some good things and bad things. So does everybody else. I mean, it's okay. You know, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's okay. You know, I mean, they got a lot of, there's other guys down there too that work behind the scenes that came from WWE too. So
a lot of people. Yeah.
They got a bunch of people. So one of the guys actually is I hired at WWE. He worked with me. So yeah, it's okay. I got nothing bad to say, and I got nothing. I'm not whatever. I mean, I think it's, I guess, I still feel like, even though I'm not with the company anymore, I still feel like anytime like when I see a talent jump over there, I'm like, that sucks. That's no good. So you still have that mindset, you're like I never want to see Edge leave. That's
right.
And I knew, I know Adam pretty well, and he's always been good to me. So, Christian too, Christian and I had some fun together over the years, and I like those guys, and I like them to stay with the air. But I don't even work there anymore, so I can't let it affect me all that much. So,
what are you up to these days, and how can everybody listening to this best support you and keep up with what you're doing?
I wish I could tell you I was doing something productive, but I do. I try to do. I'm basically a LinkedIn fanatic. I've been on LinkedIn every day for the last almost 3.5 years now, and I've networked all over the place. I've had interview after interview with various different television production companies, and I can't seem to get anything full time, which is really unfortunate and hard. Part time every now and then, but not very often. I have worked for a company called HJZ Productions, which is run by a former colleague of mine named Howie Zales. He used to be a cameraman backstage. They're doing stage managing, basically, to major events in the New York metropolitan area. So it's NHL games, it's college games, it's boxing, it's MMA, that kind of stuff. But I haven't done one in a long, long time. So they're pretty hard to come by. And then, I'm just working every day to figure out how I can do some side hustle,
Sure. Absolutely. That's the name of the game in 2024, man. Side hustles for life.
Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate you playing with my side hustle today, man. I really had a great time catching up with you and talking about the network. And I'm fascinated by the whole process. And I've really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I thought it was great too. I really enjoyed it as well. And again, I appreciate you letting me this opportunity. And who knows? Hopefully, maybe it'll even lead to something. Who knows? But I hope I gave you a lot of good insight and a lot of information and a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So that's the idea. So yeah, had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I had a great time too, man. If anybody listening to this has an opportunity, where should they reach out?
To contact me?
Yeah. Do you want to give a LinkedIn or an email or?
Sure. I mean, I'm at LinkedIn, John dash Carlan, LinkedIn / John dash Carlan. I think that's it. But I'm also Johnny, JOHNNY, F as in Frank, C as in car, the number 20 at Gmail.
We'll make sure we link that for everybody as well. And look forward to catching up with you down the road, man. Thanks for all the time today on Ad Free Shows, The Insiders.
Awesome, Conrad. I appreciate it again. Thanks again.